Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today we have Tim Austin with us, and Tim came out of the Michigan world way back when in his earlier years and got into Southern California and commercial real estate. So Tim, it's great to have you. If you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us a little history of how you came from Michigan, grew up in Michigan, and ended up out in Southern California, that'd be great to hear.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I was born in Michigan, near the city of Detroit. And as a lot of folks did during those times, we migrated out toward the suburbs a bit and taken a couple of stops in Westland and Livonia and Redford, and then eventually came out to the West Bloomfield area. We enjoyed a lot of the four seasons, snow skiing and water skiing and on the lakes and fall and spring, just a great place to be. But I knew someday that I would be destined to move elsewhere, and it was probably going to be California. Now, mind you, I had never visited California and didn't really know much about it, but it was just one of those little things that was a whisper in the back of my mind. While still in Detroit and growing up as a young adult, getting out of school, I had a good job with an engineering firm, but I was not an engineer. And so, I was going to be limited there. Fortunately, it was above average income and pay. I started investing in real estate when I was 19 years old and did, half a dozen places that owned and operated, rented them out. A couple of them we remodeled and sold. And I was doing financing on the side before you even needed a license to do it. And that was always a secondary career because I had the regular job. Well, the regular job was ending in the cycle. A good friend had moved out to California, and I visited him, helped him move out, visited him a couple of times, and decided it would probably be a real good move for me to go there once I was ready and set up for another career. That led me into the hospitality industry, working in hotels and resorts in the food and beverage departments, managing restaurants and nightclubs and that sort of thing. Going out of a different industry and trying to get in eventually to the real estate industry, I needed something that I was good at, that I knew what to do, and that would pay the bills. So that was the first 5 years of California while I studied and got my real estate license. And then I said goodbye to that industry. I'd become a much better customer than an employee, because I, kind of like my holidays and weekends, and I missed my sleep. Working 16-hour days, 5 and 6 days a week was wearing a little thin on me at the time.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. While I was a manager bartender at an upscale steakhouse, I met a gentleman that was a real estate broker. He owned and operated a mortgage company, and we got along quite well. He had encouraged me to get a license. He said, "Look, you could do it. It's what you're doing now. It's just, you can apply it to this industry, and I promise you, you'll work, a lot less, and you'll make a lot more if you just want to do it." And he was spot on. He was 1,000% right. It took me about 6 months. I closed my first transaction, left the hospitality industry, and struggled for a little bit, but learned my way, and then had quite a good career and rather diverse, all revolving around different types of real estate.
Yeah, you got into the mortgage world and then also into sales and investment sales and so forth. So I'm just curious, going back to your 19-year-old self, I'm curious what a property in Michigan cost when you were 19.
The first property that I bought with a good friend from high school, we did it together. It was condemned, so there was a little challenge there, but that was $11,000, and that was yeah, it was a two-bedroom, one bathroom, what we used to call a cabin or a cottage, yeah, very close to a lake that we had to convert over to a three-bedroom, two-bath, and that went well. I believe he still owns that thing today.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, yeah, we purchased another one for $25,000. It wasn't condemned, but it needed about that much work. But we did. I had $5,000 at the time, so that's what we bought. We did all the work ourselves. I learned a tremendous amount about building trades, Luckily, I had a little bit of that in school, but I could build a home, almost everything myself. And I was learning during those years because we couldn't afford to manage to pay people to do it. So we did it ourselves. And he ended up becoming a general contractor and building brand new subdivisions and everything. So it really was what we were suited for. Uh, a
Wow.
normal house then, we're getting to be about 100 to $125,000 for what we used to call an upwardly mobile young professional, or a yuppie, as they call it, or millennials
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a good family home at 100 and a quarter in a nice neighborhood, that wasn't, that had low crime rates and good schools and all that kind of stuff. And that
So
was the very early 80s.
so that was still in Michigan or was that in San
That was
Diego?
in Michigan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then when you came out to San Diego, what was the average price of a house when you came out to San Diego?
Okay, it was 1989, Thanksgiving Day, and the average house for, let's just say, a family home, the majority of the homes in the area were roughly 300,000 to 500,000.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that funny little thing happened with the Gulf War and everything, and another housing crisis. The S&L failure was what was
Oh
attributed
yeah.
to that. Yeah, and there's 1,000 foreclosures a month in the county of San Diego alone, and prices went down to just over 200,000 for that
Oh
same
wow.
house. Yeah,
So like a $100,000 downturn.
or more. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
about a 40% reduction in a lot of cases. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
And
and so that was when interest rates went very low because the economy was so hard. Interest rates, they lower interest rates to try and spur business. Business started occurring, and that was great. And so therefore, people started buying homes. Values increased and went up to that about where they were. And then they jumped about another 100 to 150 grand. And all of a sudden, there's that thing called the dot-com bubble
oh yeah.
and
Right.
Y2K. And so that caused a bit of reduction in sales price and whatnot. And then it built back up again, and it got up to around 700,000, 600,000. And then the housing crisis of 2008 is when it started, but 11 was technically the worst year. Uh,
Yeah.
then in San Diego County, they really only went down about 20%. And they came back up rather quickly after about 2 years of weeding it out, doing massive foreclosures and all that kind of stuff. And then they're right back at the same value. And then for the following 8 or 9 years, they had double digit appreciation. So they're going to 12, 10%, 11% year after year after year after year. So houses doubled in less than 10 years.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Then you came
And
up
then
to the
COVID hit.
pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And during the pandemic, they went up again, probably 25% across
Oh,
the board.
wow.
Yeah, it was a huge run up very, very quickly, and it died as quick as it came. It lasted about 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, and then we're really still reeling from that now. Interest rates were skyrocketed to stop the inflation, and the interest rates have not come down yet, so there's still stagflation in the real estate world, although still business is being done every day. And prices continue to increase the last 3 years, about 2 or 3%, which is normal.
Yeah. Okay. So it's stagnated, but it's still kind of going up a little bit. There's still
Yep.
high demand,
Yes,
even though interest rates are high and loans are expensive. There's still a high demand for housing.
there is. California, by and large, has a big housing shortage. There's just simply not enough buildings for the amount of people who need to be housed. They also have a problem with affordability. Roughly 60% of all adults, working adults, wouldn't qualify to own a home based on their what we call a debt to income ratio, or what they earn versus what it costs. So that's a huge problem. Uh, Yet, for the people who can manage to get in one way or another, through different buying programs and loan programs that we have, that really we bridge that gap for the first time buyer. And if they had bought before, because of the appreciation, they have a large enough down payment, so the business is still steady, and therefore it's much slower, but therefore it's still appreciating in value. Even though we've seen a lot of price cuts, that was from that false increase from COVID. So we're still seeing that end of it too.
So what's a average rate of a home loan these days?
Well, 30-year fixes are traditional, and for the traditional housing, $1 million and less or thereabouts, you're in the very high 6% to the low or middle 7% range,
Wow.
and that's good credit, a good down payment. You're a very likely risk, if they will, or the
Right.
banks will want to lend to you, and they'll compete to lend to you. Um, but it's still going to cost you that much. So your average payment now is well over $3,000 a month. You're
Wow.
$3,000 to $5,000 a month for the average person to own a condominium or a home and operate it and pay for it.
Yeah.
So when we start shaking that down, you're supposed to have your housing expenses at 25% or 28%, and then with all the rest of your expenses being you know homes or cars and student loans and whatever else you got going on, Johnny's school and braces and all that kind of stuff. You're supposed to be around that 40 to 45%. Okay, so if we do quick math, that means you make 10 grand a month. Okay,
Right.
well, how many people do you know that are in that supposedly upper 1% income bracket? You're over $100,000 a year. If someone's making less than 80 or $90,000 a year, they're getting breaks on their financing because they're considered under the median income. Well, the reality is they don't make enough to own a house. So the government has come up with programs and some grants and gifts and money and lower rates and relaxed loan programs to help people acquire that first home. Otherwise, they're just going to rent.
You're talking 100 grand or 120 grand pre-taxes, right?
Yeah,
Or
gross income, gross income.
gross income. Yeah. Right. Right. So
Yep.
then throw in taxes anyway. Yeah, it's very, very expensive to try and own a home these days.
Yeah, and especially in our area because of the price of the home, the acquisition price. There's if you're to buy in any kind of area that's in demand, you're starting at $500,000, and that's not anything that's very much entry level.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can barely get a house for 500,000, right? In a
Not a house. You can get a condominium, but not a house.
oh, oh, okay. Okay. Well,
Now
there.
let's quantify that. If you're in Yuma, or somewhere nearby, yeah, you could probably get a house for 500,000. But no, anywhere we want to live, townhomes and condominiums start, in the very high threes. You don't ever see those, and nobody ever gets one. You're in the mid to high fours, and that you're more lucky than good if you get that. And then when you're in the fives, that's when you can actually put in an offer and get the house.
Well, that leads me to my next question about what's happening with the apartment rental market in San Diego.
Well, it's had a large escalation in what it costs for monthly rent for the last dozen years. It
Yeah,
was somewhat affordable prior to that because LA markets in Orange County and that were much more expensive, and so it was to earning what we earn in California, which is usually a little bit more than the other parts of most of the parts of the country. It was somewhat affordable, but that has really caught up with the other high cost areas, and rents have subsequently gone up dramatically. Usually now to the tune of about double in the last 10 years. So if you're paying,
wow,
yeah, 1,800 a month for a couple of bedrooms and a couple of bathrooms and whatnot, well, you're double that now.
3,600.
Yeah.
So you got into the short-term rental world. That is, I assume that's more in the kind of vacation areas.
It is, yes. And if we're going to circle back to San Diego quickly, uh, that was part of the surge in San Diego, as it was in most coastal or mountain towns. Deserts, mountains, and coastal is where the short-term vacation rentals are most popular because that's where people like to vacation.
Right.
Uh, San Diego, it got so bad that they've drastically stopped making permits legal, period. They cut them off for quite a while. They've put a cap on the total amount that's going to be regionally, and it's by neighborhood and county and those sort of things. And they're just going to, some are grandfathered in, and others are just not going to renew those permits because that drove the housing price way up. Someone would buy a house, turn it into vacation rental. Their payment is 5 grand. They're making 15 grand doing short-term rentals, giving people a place to go on vacation. So that worked on one end, but it didn't work on the other. That was why I was attracted to it originally. I bought my first place in Palm Desert after having one of my clients helping them and teaching them how to do it in Big Bear for 5 years. And when I saw his income was $240,000 from vacation rental, back when homes were, $500,000,
Yeah, right.
a line went off. That's a clue, Watson. And a light went off, and I switched from buying and owning condominiums in South Orange County for the most part, long-term traditional rentals, into purchasing one of those mid-century modern Jetsons homes. And my wife is an interior designer, so she designed it, and it was a very good success in the early 2000s, all the way through about 2008. Fortunately, we got out of it before the big crash, and then we since then came back, and now we own and operate half a dozen furnished vacation rental type property, and we manage another half a dozen for some of my clients and friends and whatnot. In that vacation short term or seasonal rental where they're furnished, you come in, they're an Airbnb, Verbo type of property.
And is the market still pretty good in that field?
Well, it is good overall. It's been much regulated in the last, 5 or 6 years, because the pendulum swung too far in the wrong direction, and people were having these homes and not maintaining their people who are renting. They were getting a little disturbance to the neighborhood, and a phrase came out: nobody wants to move next to a motel.
Oh,
And so, yeah, they've put a lot of different restrictions in most areas, and the ones that have not are every year you see more and more restrictions coming in on these short-term vacation rental homes, limiting the number that are available, per capita per neighborhood. The amount of times you can actually rent them in a year is another one. They don't want you renting them every single weekend of the year, even if you can. Outdoor music is prohibited in a lot of cases and things like that. They just don't want, people in there roughhousing and throwing
right,
parties and
right.
that sort of thing. And that's very understandable. We as owners don't want that either, because that's how houses gets trashed, and
Right,
your
right.
neighbors are mad at you, and neither one of those are a good combination.
No.
Fortunately, we've stayed on the progressive end on that. I've never had any issue whatsoever that caused anger or angst amongst any of my neighbors or the city or any of that sort of thing. We did have to slap a few hands on people that were more or less than anything else just ignorant, or just kind of maybe a little under the influence, and not conscious of what they really need to be, and it was corrected in a non-issue very, very quickly. So we've been fortunate there, uh, I believe, because of how we represent and how we treat those people, very well before they even actually enter the home or even get on vacation. They
Well,
know what's
most
going
of
on
the
once they start.
vacation rental sites, rate the tenants, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you get sort of a clue from that, but I'm sure occasionally that, doesn't always work. But anyway, it sounds like you've had that under control. Have you had a situation where you bought a short-term rental house and then the laws changed and you had to sell or do something else with it?
Yes, I have. And me personally, my wife and I, it was a multifamily property, and we do still own it, and we still operate it as a furnished place. We've lived in it a couple of times, but we do it seasonally. What occurred was they said, well, if you have multifamily structures, more than two, then you no longer can do short term. You have to do a minimum of 28-day rental, period,
Oh, oh,
or
interesting.
longer. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that changes the complexion of it all. And if you have, in a lot of cases, if you have like a duplex or a granny flat, or something like that, then you can do that short term, but the owner has to be present on that property as it's being rented short term.
Oh, oh,
You know,
interesting. Oh,
yeah,
so you can have an ADU or something like that and rent it out short term, but it has to be on your property.
yeah, and the owner would have to be there. And then, you use the term ADU, and that's a very common term. Uh, but if you go through ADU, I've even seen some municipalities that say, yeah, we'll give you a permanent ADU, but you're renting it to a resident. Don't
Ah,
even think that you're going to do it short term. This is supposed to be built affordable housing, not a rich guy's place to come and play in the neighborhood.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you have to do a 1 year lease or at least 28 days or whatever it requires for more of a
yes, yes,
long-term
yeah,
lease. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
And I
different
see that
proposition
probably being
altogether.
more common
Yeah,
in years to come in more municipalities and counties and that sort of
that's
thing.
interesting. Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like you've had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. And so what's your prediction of the future here?
Well, I put a lot of eggs in the basket of multifamily, residential, small to mid-sized places, a duplex, a fourplex, 6, 8, 10, 12 units, because that's an entry where for an investor, they can afford to do that, and you make a good profit. You're helping people along the way, and you're building generational wealth. Now, for the tenant and the occupant, it's affordable. They can move into these places. They're a little bit nicer than the massive, apartment complexes that have their own standard of living, let's call it,
Right, right.
um, you know, and it's a little more intimate and boutique, and we consider ourselves a boutique service company. So we've moved in that direction in owning, operating, buying, fixing, and flipping, and managing for some of our clients and advising on them for what we call income producing property. We do take also the occupants, and they're all fully aware that on our flip side of our conversation, that we are mortgage lenders and we are real estate agents, and we can take you from a tenant to home ownership using different programs and whatnot, and in some cases working with the property owner on a rent to own kind of thing, where they'll pay so much money and then they'll get some credits back and that sort of thing. So we can turn them into homeowners when normally they may not be able to get that path available for them.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So give me a typical sort of setup on a rent to own approach.
Okay, on a rent to own approach, I'm going to keep it simple and just say that the seller has represented that from day one. So
Yeah.
you're looking through the ad, you go on Zillow, you go on apartments.com, and you contact somebody, and you say, well, really, I'd like to own someday. I'd probably like to own this type of property. Okay, fine. Let's just say that owner says, okay, I'd be willing to do that over a said period of time, and here's the stipulations. Our major lenders, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, FHA and VA, all have programs designed toward that with guidelines for both the tenant and the owner, where you pay X amount for your rent, and usually it's whatever the market rate is, and then maybe a little bit extra, a couple $100 more, and that's to go toward eventually the down payment. You establish a history of that, so you're building credit history as well, which was very helpful when you go to purchase that home 12 or 24 or 36 months or something like that uh, down the road, and end up owning that home.
Well, wait, let's back up just for a second. You said that Freddie Mac and the feds have sort of guidelines on how to make this work.
They do, yeah. Yeah, they very much want to see that happen, home ownership for people.
Oh, that's interesting. So they don't actually provide any loan in that case, but they give you some nice guidelines to go by to help the process, right?
They do, and they do have incentives under some of those loan programs that will allow for rent to own because it is an established thing. They follow the guidelines of the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are generally speaking the ones that do have down payment assistance and grants and a little more flexible qualifying, maybe lower interest rates or incentives to help that first time home buyer get in, and also help that landlord afford to be able to do this. They want to incentivize the landlord, the homeowner, in order to allow this to happen. Uh, there's a common uh, reality in that, when somebody owns a home versus rents a home, they're going to maintain it and keep it better in better condition and all those things. And so that's better for the cities, the neighborhoods as well, to have a lower concentration of rental homes and a higher concentration of owner occupied homes. So
Well,
there's a whole different window there. But
I was not aware of that. That's very interesting. Well, if somebody wants to get into this program or even talk to you, where would they find you, Tim?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm easy to get a hold of. I answer the phone at my cell phone, 760-310-5485. That's of course a text message. That's the quickest and easiest way. I do have email that we can go Gmail account. It's my first name, middle initial, last name, Tim B, as in Brian Austin at gmail.com. We have an LLC and a corporation. It's Properties for All LLC. So it's propertiesforall.org. Once again, propertiesforall.org. Or just Google me. I'm in the Palm Springs area. I was in the San Diego area, the upper part, the North County, for 35 years. So I do come up on Yelp and Google and that sort of thing. Nowhere near as much as I'd like to, but you can find me.
So I'm just curious, the last question here. You've got propertiesforall.org. Is that an actual nonprofit organization?
It is not. In 2019, the .org changed their bylaws and guidelines, and a traditional for-profit company can get a .org. There are if you read through it and how you do it, you have to be doing something that's contributing to society is basically what they're telling you. And we fall under that category quite quickly and easily.
Well, that's interesting. I was not aware of that. That's pretty cool. So anyway,
Well, we thought it was good for us too, because we really are a boutique company. We really do work out of the box in order to what can I do to improve your living situation today, and what can I do to improve the property that you own today and for long term. So that's really our philosophy on business.
that's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this all works. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed our time together, and I really appreciate you letting me get on my little soapbox here, and you keeping this a very nice and pleasant conversation, informational for all, and not just all about me.
No, this is great. This is great. Well, we will talk again soon, I think.
Yeah, thank you. You're a great monitor. I welcome the opportunity anytime.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.